The Anchor Signal, Chapter 4, Ready or Not. Hide. She whispered it through the monitor as the night spine boarded. He heard their gangway connect and interlock. Metallic dread. Soon they would force the door open and be inside, searching. Ray climbed out of the turret hatch. Running, frantic and searching, he noticed an enormous water tank in the maintenance bay. Behind it, he found a large filtration chamber bolted to the side of the thing, about the size of an industrial dryer. He climbed inside and closed the service door. He listened. Without a primary power source, the Starling creaked and groaned in ominous ways. He heard a loud clang, like someone dropped a pipe wrench down a metal staircase. He wondered if it was just the spaceship's twisting frame, or if it was them. He couldn't tell. He was blind in that little metal box. The exterior door alarm kicked off, startling Ray. The lights outside his box turned red while the alarm spun through its cycle. "Warning," said the Starling AI. "Exterior door breach." The alarm sounded for a bit more, and then suddenly, it cut off. He listened.
"Run the scanners,"
said a deep voice soaked in brown whiskey and methamphetamine.
"Find them."
Ray recoiled from the voice and the footsteps that followed. So many of them, loud and brutish and stomping on the metal floors. It sounded like an entire platoon out there in the darkness. Ray hunkered down and did his best to control his breathing. They clambered by. Moments later, he heard something worse. A high-pitched whine, followed by a mechanical unfolding. Then a pulsing tone, like a radar. Scanner, thought Ray. I'm gonna die. He thought about the setting they chose for death. Would he awaken as a translucent spirit and just float back to his avatar's body? Would there be a loading screen for another playthrough, or maybe a lobby where he could choose a new paradise? Going by the no-guardrail choices they made for pain, hunger, fatigue, and other experiences, he assumed permadeath was the way to go. One wrong move and you're deleted. Annihilated. There was no fade in that black. It was a switch. The thought of such a plastic death filled his mouth with the taste of copper. The scanner got louder. It approached from down the hall. Through the crack in the door, he could see a grid of green laser light stretch out across the walls, the floor, the ceiling, approaching like fingers of death. Every ounce of Ray's blood screamed for him to bolt, to break free from that box and run away. But he knew well enough that they'd lock onto the sound of running and tackle him into some horrible way. There were just too many of them, and they were all over the ship, searching. The scanner entered the mechanical bay. He held his breath, listening to the thing's tiny rotors and hydraulics. At times, its pitch sounded like a small circular saw, piercing and brutal. It cast a web of lasers over the entire room and swept it. He was sure it would stop suddenly and lock on him with some sort of horrific alarm. They would converge on him and it would be over. They'd stomp his guts out, laughing. He waited. He listened. The thing scanned the room thoroughly, sweeping all corners with its horrible lasers. It passed right over him a few times, freezing him in place. He didn't dare breathe. Then the scanner backed into the hall, dragging its green lattice of lasers with it. It rolled away on treads that had crushed bones on the smoke-swept plains of desolate moons, their shadows 3 miles long. Even its mechanics sounded evil, as if all its lubricants had evaporated decades ago, and now the thing just ground along, all steel and hydraulics and mechanical fans. It crawled away. Ray gasped. He needed air. Bad. The wave of panic in his mind had not yet receded. How did it not find me, thought Ray. I was right here. He looked around in his little metal box and realized it was likely the 750 gallons of water floating around inside. His engineering mind thought about how light refracts in water, like in his old pool at night. Veins of light dancing wildly. He was saved by optics. He heard a scream. It was distant and somewhere upstairs. The sound of it filled Ray with dread and locked him in place. He listened. More screaming and commotion. Some of the men shouted to one another, cursing. He thought maybe she'd put up a good fight and somehow beat them back to their scrap heaps. But then he heard some of them laugh, and his heart sank. What would become of her? Didn't sound good. Clearly, this was a time for action. The sound of his wife screaming while being dragged away would rouse any husband into a wild rage. He wanted to burst out of that filtration chamber and save her like in all the action sequences he daydreamed while in the shower. But his logical mind kept asking questions. How could I possibly do anything, he thought. There are so many of them. Sure, I could run out there, but what good would it do? Maybe slow them down for a minute? I could help her better by surviving this and getting help. Are you really going to just sit there and listen to monsters drag your wife away? Ray agonized like this for the next few minutes, stopping to listen here and there. The clamoring and their screams started getting further away. Where are they taking her, thought Ray. He wondered what these freaks wanted from them. His mind went to dark places he didn't want to imagine. Fuck, thought Ray. Come on, man, you've got to do something. No, don't. There's no way you can take all of them. They'll stomp your guts out. The clamoring and the shouting suddenly ceased, like crickets on a summer night after a flash of lightning. He listened. Nothing. Shaking, he quickly climbed out of his metal hiding box and ran into the hallway. He couldn't feel them anymore. Everything was still as the starling creaked and twisted. A bright light from outside splashed on the wall, and Ray scrambled and looked out a nearby window. He watched the Night Spine ship disconnect from the Starling, its landing lights bright. "Hey!" shouted Ray at the spaceship beyond his window, the spaceship that was presently abducting his dead wife. "Hey, stop! No!" Ray punched the window, but the glass was thick and held strong. He shouted at the Night Spine and raged while they left him behind. "Christine!" he shouted. "No!" Helpless, he watched the scavenger ship bank from the Starling and pulse away into the blackness of space. Ray watched his thruster flares fade in the emptiness of the void as it closed around him. He found himself alone again, having just lost the wife he'd found again. He found himself on a derelict ship with no power, no means of getting to safety. He found himself trapped in a digital prison, an eternal hell spun up from some server farm in Texas. He screamed.